like for you, just to tell me, when you think of Africa, what do you think about? First thing. People do what? People that take care of themselves. When you think of Africa, what occurs to you? What do you think about? People living in poverty. How about yourself, young man? When you think of Africa, what do you think about? People going through struggle. Yes, what do you think about when you think of Africa? Origins. Yes? The AIDS epidemic. Anybody else? Now those are pretty good responses and pretty basic responses. Generally when I ask people what they think of Africa, African Americans, they tell me three things. And the first one, I'm surprised you didn't say it. If you had thought about it a little while longer, you probably would have came up with it, and that's wild animals. Wild animals, right? Lions, tigers, no tigers in Africa, but they're on TV. Giraffes, wildebeest, and all of that. And the second thing that people tell me most of the time is very poor people. Somebody said people living in poverty, somebody said people going through changes, going through struggles. And the other thing is AIDS and HIV. And that really scares me when I hear a young person say when they think of Africa that they think of people with AIDS and HIV. Now, it's interesting how we look at Africa. For example, if I had asked you what you thought about when you thought about Europe or Asia, nobody would have said people with AIDS and HIV. Very few people would have said people living in poverty. So we have a certain perception of Africa. And my job tonight, and in general, is to help change the way we look at Africa, because we come from Africa. Whether we like it or not, we are African people. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, because again, we are taught to associate Africa with very negative things. Most people would not say when they think of Africa, they think of the wealthiest continent in the world. Do you know Africa has more natural resources than any continent on earth? Africa has everything you can think of. Gold, diamonds, silver, oil, uranium, bauxite, you name it. There's a certain product that goes in every cell phone. I heard a couple cell phones go off already. I got one in my pocket. I hope it doesn't go off. But Africa, especially Central Africa, produces a mineral that makes the use of cell phones possible. When people think of Africa, most of the time, they don't think that that's where humanity began. Do you know the first people came from Africa? The first people to build a house lived in Africa. The first people to wear clothes. The first people to have a language. The first people to use metal weapons and tools. The first people to chart the stars in the heavens. The first people to have a school. The first people to have a university. The first people to bury the dead. The first people to count. The first people to play music. All that comes out of Africa. So I think that when we begin to think of Africa in a more positive way, we begin to think of ourselves in a more positive way. Now, when I was a young person, when I was your age, if you had called me an African, you better be ready to fight. Because I would have considered that a real insult. We would use words like African booty scratcher. Things like that. Really what we thought the most negative connotation of Africa was. And now, if you call me an African, I'm going to be your friend for a lifetime. Because I'm so proud to be an African now. That's why history is important. History gives you a sense of empowerment. It gives you a way of looking at yourself. It's not about just a lot of facts and figures, but it is designed to empower you. And so that's what we're going to try to do tonight, and we're going to do it visually. I want you just to relax. I'm going to give you a lot of information. Look at the pictures. Perhaps we'll have time for a question and answer period. Maybe you won't even have any questions tonight. But I would like to think that if you don't have questions tonight, if you don't have an immediate response, we will plant some seeds for the future. So having said that, I want to thank Life Skills and the other organizations and institutions for inviting me out tonight. Hopefully we're going to have a good experience, and we're going to begin the slide presentation. Let's turn off the lights. I'm not sure if we can get this one off, but if we can, if anybody knows how to turn that one off.
You have that on the bit so I can see you.
Okay.
It's very dark now.
Now this slide right here kind of introduces the whole thing. And this, I guess you could say, kills two birds with one stone, as they say. What you have, first of all, is an African scientist. Nobody said anything about science when I asked you what you thought about Africa. But Africa is the birthplace of science, and this is an African scientist, and he is what we call a paleontologist. A paleontologist is somebody who studies old bones and fossils. And the old bones and fossils that he has in his hand in this case are very important. These are the remains of an African woman, an African female, who lived about 3.5 million years ago. And at the time these bones were identified in the early and mid-1970s, they were considered the oldest human beings, oldest human bones, or pre-human bones that had ever been found. Her name is Dinknesh. These are the remains of an African woman, and you can spell it if you like, D-E-N-K-N-E-S-H, D-E-N-K-N-E-S-H, and that means you are wonderful. And these bones were found in Ethiopia in 1974. And they are dated to about 3.3, 3.5 million years old. And so Africa is the birthplace of humanity, the most ancient humanity, and also more recent humanity. Here's the cover of a Newsweek magazine going back, I think, to the late 1980s. And you can see it says, scientists explore a controversial theory about man's origins. Now, the people that are being depicted here are modern human beings. The bones I just showed you are archaic, are very ancient human beings. But the images depicted on the cover of this magazine are modern human beings. It's supposed to be a depiction of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, with Jerry curls no less. And what it says, essentially, is that based on DNA studies or genetic studies, you can trace all humanity back to a single African female. That's what this theory is about. So what I'm saying, to paraphrase, is that there's only one race, and that's the human race. We started in Africa as black-skinned people with what I call happy-to-be-nappy hair, natural hair, woolly hair, kinky hair, what I call good hair, because I'm looking at it from my perspective. So when people say fair skin, for me, that would be dark skin. Now that's not against anybody. Black people, they say, range in complexion from snow to crow and bright to night. But sometimes we are taught to be ashamed of our blackness. We are taught to be ashamed of our big noses and our full lips and our wide cheekbones. And so we use expressions like good hair and fair skin. But most of the time when we use those terms, when we say fair skin, we're talking about skin that looks more like European. And when we say good hair, we're talking about hair that for the most part is straight. Most of us do not have naturally straight hair. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But that is, for the most part, those are not the features of African people. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm trying to teach you an appreciation of yourself at the same time without developing an antagonism or hostility towards anybody else. So here you have it. Adam and Eve, supposedly in the Garden of Eden, went to Jerry curl. And this is on the cover of Newsweek magazine. And then you have this image right here. Now this is an important piece. This is the world's first known use of mathematics. At least it was thought so at the time. Again, we're discovering new things about Africa all the time. This is called the Ishango bone, I-S-H-A-N-G-O, I-S-H-A-N-G-O. It's called the Ishango bone, and it's called that after a region or river in Central Africa called Ishango. And at the time these bones, or this bone was identified in the middle 1970s too, the date was given about 25,000 years old. And what you see here, if you look carefully, are not just carved on the surface of the bone in a sequential order. And some people would even argue that this is a very primitive form of a computer. Now this is not me saying this, this is what Western scientists are saying. But within the last few years, another mathematical bone has been found, a counting stick has been found in South Africa about 39,000 years old. Now when I was going to high school many years ago in South Central Los Angeles, I had what is now called math anxiety. That is, I was definitely afraid of mathematics. I was good in geography, I was good in history, I was good in social sciences, but mathematics, I was terrified about.